Thank you for listening to Soho Bites, the only podcast in the world, as far as we're aware, dedicated to talking about films set in Soho, the beating heart of bohemian cosmopolitan London. If you would like to support the show, you can do this in the form of a star rating or review at sohobitespodcast.com/review, or if you'd like to put a small amount of money where your mouth is, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Donations can be from as little as £3, which will buy, at London prices, about half a drink for one of our thirsty guests. You may hear some different URLs in the upcoming episode, but by far the easiest way is to follow one of those links. They are again sohobitespodcast.com/review and sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you for your continued support and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Soho Bites. Soho Bites is the podcast in which we talk to people who love Soho and people who love film. My name is Dominic Delaghi, and I'm sorry there's been such a long wait for this episode. Soho Bites now has an annoying younger sibling podcast called Mural Morsels, which sucks all the attention. But I finally managed to fob it off with an ice cream to focus on this episode of Soho Bites. But do check out Mural Morsels anyway. It goes out every Friday morning on the Soho Hour on Soho Radio, and you can find it afterwards at sohobitespodcast.com/Mural Morsels. This is the third and final part of our mini-series all about the famous and fabulous Windmill Theatre. In a couple of minutes, we have the last instalment of my conversation with former Windmill girl Jill Millard Shapiro, in which she talks about the final days of the mill. If you missed the previous two episodes, don't worry, this is the internet. They're both still there, like your browsing history. So I'd recommend you listen to episodes 13 and 14 first. In those, Jill talks about the early days of the theatre and her time there in the late 50s and early 60s. There have been 4 films made about the Windmill Theatre over the years, and we've talked about 3 of them in previous episodes of Soho Bites. In the second half of this episode, we're looking at our 4th one, although it was actually the first to be made. Strangely though, this first ever film about the Windmill Theatre was not made on these shores. From 1945, it's Tonight and Every Night starring Rita Hayworth, and it's a big, glitzy Hollywood portrayal of that venerable old British institution. Talking of venerable old British institutions, Adam Roach from the Secret History of Hollywood podcast makes a return visit to the show to talk about Tonight and Every Night with me, so please get comfortable and hang around for that. A few weeks ago, I travelled out to Essex and spent a delightful afternoon with Jill Millard Shapiro. Jill is a member of an exclusive club, former Windmill girls, who performed in the theatre's long-running and ever-changing show Revue de Ville. In the history of the Windmill Theatre, Jill appears towards the end of it and only left Great Windmill Street a few months before the theatre finally closed its doors for good in October 1964. After the death of the Windmill's legendary producer Vivian Van Dam in 1960, the reins were passed to his daughter Sheila, who up until this point had been a rally car driver. But by this stage, London, and Soho in particular, was a very different place from the one in which Revue de Ville began, and the show was approaching the end of its natural life. In previous episodes, Jill mentioned some of the key personnel at the Windmill, including Johnny Gale, the stage manager, Laura Henderson, who began the whole thing with Vivian Van Dam back in 1932, and Van Dam's right-hand woman, Anne Mittel. I began this segment of the conversation by asking Jill about another very important person at the Windmill, choreographer Keith Lester.
Oh, Keith Lester.
I believe he was quite an intimidating person.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about him?
Keith was master of the one-line put-down. He used to flare his nostrils and draw his breath in and puff his chest out and tell you off.
Really?
Oh, yes. A lot of girls didn't really like him, but I think I realised quite early on that really what I was learning from this man was incredible. But a lot of girls didn't get on with him particularly, but I did. To the point when I was going to get married, and because he knew classical music, I asked his advice about what music to use in the church, so he gave me a list of things. So he actually chose my wedding music for me.
Nice.
So Keith was intimidating, definitely. Every show had one ballet scene. Sometimes there'd be a nude in the background of the ballet, but often not. Just one ballet scene. He choreographed that, and he choreographed the fan dance, which was an amazingly intricate, difficult dance to do. The only nude allowed to move on the Windmill Theatre stage was the principal fan dancer, but that's because she was covered by giant fans, huge, great big ostrich feather fans. As she moved her fans, the girls on stage, also with large ostrich feather fans, would cover the nude. So as one fan moved, another one took its place very quickly. And this was a whole choreographed routine. So it was very intricate. Now, those fans could interlock. If the girl was a bit late and you were moving yours and that one was a bit late coming in, they could interlock. Then another girl would have to give the principal her fan, go off and get another one.
Okay.
It was, if anything happened so disastrous as that, most of the time it didn't, because it was so well choreographed, so well rehearsed, that we all knew what to do. And it was extremely beautiful to watch.
Principal fan dancers, you'd reached a certain level, had you, by the time you got to...
Yes. Yeah.
And you did become a principal fan dancer, didn't
I
you?
was a principal fan dancer quite early on. But there was Ronald Brydon wrote in the New Statesman on the 16th of October 1964 that he'd been to the Windmill because he'd never been. He wanted to see it before it closed.
So 16th of October, so that's like a fortnight before it closed,
yes,
basically.
He went to see the show. He was rather impressed with the principal fan dancer, who was a girl called Serena Armitage. And this is what he wrote. Serena carried 2 huge white wafers of plumes, one front, one back, and nothing on between. The other girls were dressed and carried black and red fans the same size. When Serena swung a fan aloft, a red or black fan would take its place. The girls passed her around the stage as if with huge feathered tongs. Most of the time she was swathed in plumage from shoulder to instep, looking like Ginger Rogers in an old musical. At the end, the lights turned rose red behind her. The great white fans parted and she posed for a moment, silhouetted in the nude. It was lovely. That's a jaded journalist.
Yeah, you'd think an old hack
yes.
from the
from
Fleet
the
Street.
New Statesman.
Yeah, that's nice.
I know. No, he really wrote beautifully about that show. I think he was more impressed than he might have imagined he was going to
Than
be.
he's better to be, yeah. As far as I know, there are 4 films about the Windmill.
Oh dear.
There's Miss Henderson Presents.
Yes.
There's quite a terrible one from 1966 called Secrets of a Windmill Girl.
I won't talk about that because I'm in it.
Are you in that?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, we didn't know that it was going to be a bad film.
No, because it was...
And Pauline Collins, I mean, let's face it, and very good names in that film.
Yeah, Martin Jarvis is there.
I know,
Yeah.
and he was lovely. We were just given little scenes and scripts, not knowing what the main storyline would be.
So you're in the audition scenes or something, or...
Yes, I was in those audition scenes. How can I explain it? In the beginning, it started out as it was going to be a documentary.
Yeah.
So we did the documentary bits, or dramatised documentary bits. We had no idea that we were going to turn it into this stupid film about drugs and God knows what else.
Yeah.
We didn't know
Fallen
that.
girls. And
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
ridiculous. That never happened. So, yes, I mean, and I know that Pauline Collins hides under the table every time it's mentioned.
Yeah, we talked about it in an early episode of the programme, actually, and
Yeah.
strung it together to
Ghastly.
make a film. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah,
film.
really ghastly.
So there's that. There's
Forget that one.
yeah.
No, don't like that one.
There's the Murder at the Windmill from 1949.
Yes, I like that one.
That is a good one, isn't it?
It's terrible, really. It's not a good film. But for anyone who was at the Windmill, we love watching it because Johnny Gale, the stage manager, plays himself. The
Right.
little round fat person in the Argyle sweater.
Yeah.
And he's really good at playing himself. But Van Damme wanted to play himself in that film. He wanted to do it. And he failed his audition because he was told he was too wooden and not realistic. He said, but it's me.
Was he offended by that?
Yes.
What?
I think it caused tremendous trouble with him and his son-in-law because Angel, who produced it, was married to Van Damme's daughter.
Oh, right, okay.
So Danny Angel was his son-in-law.
Oh, I just didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting link. And the fourth film that I can think, there may be more, but I'm not sure that there is this Rita Hayworth one, Tonight and Every Night.
Yes.
Which apparently Van Damme didn't like.
I don't think, it wasn't that he didn't like the film or Rita Hayworth. He was really annoyed that they dared to make a film about his theatre without asking his permission.
Yeah.
Well, of course they didn't have to. They didn't need his permission.
No.
Of course they didn't. But I think that film, why he was annoyed as well, the author of the play Tonight and Every Night that was on in Broadway, he'd allowed her to stay in the Windmill at night with the Windmill girls during the Blitz. So she had that feel and that. So then the show gets put on Broadway. Then Hollywood picks it up and makes a film with Rita Hayworth. And he was annoyed because nobody asked him for his permission. So when he wrote his book, he thought he'd get one back and take their title, which of course didn't affect anything. It's rather amusing, isn't it?
No, and actually, it promotes the film as well.
I'm so angry, I'm going to use the title. Oh, bless him.
I think the film, that film, I didn't particularly like. I think it has some great moments.
It does, yes. They made it a bigger theatre than it was.
Yeah.
The outside they made little and the stage they made too big.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there are some scenes in it that are very similar to the Windmill.
Okay.
Some of the dancing, the scenes, yes. And I just like anything that's to do with it. Anything like that does have a familiarity to anyone who worked at the Windmill. So we don't mind a few liberties here and there.
Yeah. Could take a few. So let's go on towards the end of... so you weren't there at the end of the...
No, my daughter was born in May 1964 and it closed in October.
Okay.
I did take her up there as a baby in arms, so I saw a few of the girls and came away again, but I wasn't there on the last night.
If it carried on, was there a possibility of going back?
Yes.
So you would have gone back when your daughter was a certain age?
There were a few married girls with children.
Okay. So that's quite progressive,
the girls
though, isn't it?
If you worked at that theatre under any umbrella, whether you were a dancer, a singer, worked in the canteen or whatever, if for some reason you could no longer dance, they would give you a job somewhere else in the theatre. One of the boys, Derek, he was getting on a bit in age, and he said, I'm no longer any good as a Windmill boy. And they put him in the wardrobe.
Right.
He became in charge of wardrobe.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Why not?
Great, yeah.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Another girl, she was one of the Windmill Girls of the Year, actually, and she had to look after her ageing mother, and Van Damme employed her as his assistant, doing what we never knew, but just as his assistant. So they'd find niches for you everywhere. There'd always be anybody loyal. If the loyalty there was tremendous.
That's
it was
amazing.
A brilliant place to be. Yeah, it was lovely.
Sounds almost like a kind of what do they call them? It's a beneficial society.
Yes, benevolent society. The Windmill Benevolent Society.
Yeah.
I know.
The closest doors finally on Halloween 1964.
Oh yes, certainly. Yes.
Were you aware that it was in its final few years?
I think the word you used was doomed.
Yeah.
When you said to me, did you know it was doomed? And no, doomed or that sort of ominous feeling was never with us. Because if you think of it in the same way as you'd say, well, this show had run for 32 years. Its format didn't change. It was coy, it was twee. The little tap dance routines with one girl, one boy, little duets, little songs, all that kind of thing was dated. It was out of date. It had got old-fashioned.
Did it feel it at the time?
Yeah, we knew. Doing these little tap dances and things, rock and roll was happening.
Yeah.
The world had changed. Everything was slightly different. But it wasn't that we were aware that it was sort of doomed. We knew, really, that it was like an old lady who needed to retire.
I think there's an idea that the rise of strip clubs and Paul Raymond stuff killed the Windmill. But from what you're saying, it seems to be that it was already... on its way out because it was dated.
It was, yes.
Were you aware of Soho and the surrounding area becoming more kind of sleazy and strip clubby?
Walking around Soho, you'd see the clip joints and the strip clubs, and you'd see pictures of Miss or the top-heavy Miss Fifi La Boom Boom round the corner, able to shake it all about, whereas we had to stand completely still. What we had to offer wasn't very sexy, really.
But then people went for a different thing, didn't they?
Yes, it was a review theatre with some nudes at the back and one fan dance, so that was pretty much it. So, the fan dance, they never saw very much until the final reveal at the end, and that was so quick. But you think, it's a bit unfair, really. They waited all that time.
Yeah.
And none of us, nobody that I know, would have changed what we did. Could have modernised it a bit, perhaps, but you certainly not as far as the sex or the nudity. So in that sense, no, we didn't feel anything bad. But also, slightly to paraphrase that same journalist who also wrote about the closure, and he said, the Windmill had afforded its audience honest, remote fantasy. It had talked their language, sung them the old songs, and let them meet that family of nice young bodies. It's an old show now. It might as well close. And I think that's very, very true. It wasn't a disaster that it closed. No. It was time.
So Jill left the Windmill to look after her baby daughter, and shortly afterwards, not unexpectedly from the sounds of it, the curtain came down on Revue de Ville for the final time. It's nearly 56 years since that happened, and in the intervening years, Jill continued to live a very full life, the details of which I simply can't include because of limitations on time. But I can say that she spent many years travelling the world with her second husband, Milton J. Shapiro, working as a photojournalist, and at the last count she had 4 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren who were born, she pointed out to me, without her permission. The damn cheek of it. It was a privilege to spend some time with Jill, hearing about her life in the Windmill, and she has my infinite thanks for agreeing to come on the show. Hello, this is what's known as a mid-roll ad. It's one of those annoying interruptions that's inserted retrospectively at just the wrong point. And the reason for it is that Soho Bites takes up hours of time every month, and I'm hoping you might be able to support the show. There are 2 ways you can do this. One is for free, and it's to leave the show a star rating or kind review. You can do that at sohobytespodcast.com/review. Or if you'd like to assist financially to help cover our costs, you can do that at sohobytespodcast.com/donate. Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption, and back to the episode. One of the Broadway shows that Columbia Studios optioned at some point in 1942 was a play called Heart of a City by Scottish writer Leslie Storm. It ran for a disappointing 28 performances at Henry Miller's Theatre, which has since been renamed the Stephen Sondheim Theatre, and it's not the only theatre to be renamed in this story. Despite its short run on the stage, somebody at Columbia saw potential in the play, and it was given a whole new lease of life when they decided to throw some big money at it, put a big star in the lead role, and put it on the big screen under the new title of Tonight and Every Night. It was eventually released, in the UK at least, only a fortnight before D-Day. The film follows the lives of some of the performers at a small West End theatre called the Music Box at the height of the London Blitz. In the establishing shot of the theatre exterior, we see that it bears the slogan, "We never missed a show," which is pretty similar to the Windmill slogan, "We never closed." In fact, if there was any doubt at all that the Music Box is the Windmill, that doubt is surely dispelled by Jill's revelation in her interview just now that the author, Leslie Storm, was given permission by Vivian Van Damme to spend time backstage with the Windmill Girls during the months of the Blitz as part of her research. It's easy to see why the bigwigs at Columbia thought this film would be a safe bet. The idea of plucky, brave Little Britain standing up to the tyrannical might of Germany had caught hold in the US, partly through the power of some spine-tingling radio broadcast by Norman Corwin, and by January 1945, when the film received its US premiere, there were over 1 million American service personnel stationed in the UK, many of whom caught the odd show or 3 at the Windmill. So the choice of Rita Hayworth, the US military's favourite pin-up girl to play the lead role of Roz, was an obvious one, a surefire winner. At this point in her life, incidentally, Rita Hayworth was married to Orson Welles, and at the start of filming was pregnant with their daughter Rebecca. For this reason, the dance scenes were all shot at the start of production before the pregnancy began to show, and certain later shots in the film were composed in a way that disguised her expanding midriff. Although names and places are changed and certain liberties are taken, there are several aspects of the Windmill that the film seeks to portray fairly closely to reality. There's a matriarchal Mrs. Henderson type character called Mrs. Tolliver, played by Florence Bates. But as there is no equivalent to Vivian Van Damme in the film, perhaps another reason he disliked it, Mrs. Tolliver becomes a composite of the two. The film also has a bash at portraying one of the cabaret acts of the type the Windmill used to put on between the musical numbers. This comes in the form of a comedy xylophonist called the Great Waldo, which, I think is fair to say, is not a high point. The very successful English producer and sometime director Victor Saville was brought in to direct the film, and Hayworth is supported by Janet Blair as best friend Judy, Lee Bowman as her love interest Paul, and Mark Platt plays Tommy, a young lad from Manchester who just loves to dance. Adam Roach is a podcaster and the brains and voice behind the Attaboy Clarence podcast and the Secret History of Hollywood podcast, so I could think of no better person to talk to about Tonight and Every Night. Certainly not one who would do it for free anyway. So I called him up on Skype. Adam Roach.
Hi.
I sent you the film, Tonight and Every Night. You were unfamiliar with it before. You're very welcome. You were unfamiliar with it before. You're now very familiar with it. I don't do out of 10 ratings on this programme, but what's your out of 10 rating for this film?
5.
5, okay.
Straight down the middle, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your first impressions of it were that it was...
Abysmal. Yeah, it's the first time... Sorry, just get straight in there.
Yeah.
It's a film I had to power through twice to get through it. For those of you who haven't seen it, it has just a very weak first act, that's all. You sort of open and there's characters just flung at you for a good half hour, flung at you. You get, the impresario lady, you have the cleaner man, you have the showgirl, you have the interviewer who just weirdly disappears, and then you have the soldier and the dancer with aspirations, and it just comes at you for the first half hour. You're going, what am I focusing on? I don't understand. Is this just theatre life? Because I'm not sure I really need a film about this. Because
it goes into flashback. Do you want to give me a quick run through of the plot until any spoilers would be inappropriate?
So it's basically, it follows life at a theatre called The Music Box, which is a thinly veiled version of the Windmill Theatre. Is that right?
I don't think it's that thinly veiled at all. It's obviously the Windmill Theatre.
You have a showgirl called Roz, played by Rita Hayworth. And you have her friend Judy, played by Janet Blair, and it's sort of hard to know how the story really begins. It's sort of they're just sort of like dancing away, and a new dancer comes in, and apparently he's Mancunian, and he auditions. It's the worst accent I've ever seen.
It is the worst accent. As a Mancunian, I'm trying not to take offence at his accent, but he doesn't even make an attempt at an accent.
Are you Mancunian?
I am Mancunian.
Oh, I couldn't tell from your accent.
Could you not?
Anyway, I'm going to start calling you Mark Platt from now on. I hated his character. I thought he was awful. I just wanted, every time he was on stage screen, I was just like putting a hand in front of, the screen.
Do you not like Mancunians? Is that your problem?
All right, Katie Hopkins. I just didn't like his character at all. I found him, just go away.
His whole thing is he doesn't follow moves, and he's very improvisational, and he dances around looms up at Mill in Lancashire, and he dances to Hitler and Mussolini's speeches.
That moment is just weird. It's like, she's to test him out, she flicks on the radio, doesn't she?
Sam, bring me your wireless. Move back, girls, and give him room. Young man, the stage is yours.
Thank you.
There's a bit of Bach playing, or a bit of classical music playing, there's a bit of jazz playing, and he sort of leaps into different routines, and then she flicks through and Hitler's giving a speech. And she flicks past him. He says, no, I like dancing to him.
Leave it alone. I often dance to him.
And she leaves it on, and he does this weird, dictatorial, marchy ballet, interpretation to a Hitler speech. It sort of has to be seen to be believed. I can't say it's bad. But you just watch it and go, why?
Yeah.
So basically, the theatre life just sort of rolls on by until some visiting soldiers arrive. Are they American soldiers?
They are British RAF airman.
Okay, so Lee Bowman's supposed to be British in this.
Yes.
I didn't get that until this very moment in time. He literally doesn't even try, does he?
No, I think
It's
this
just,
is the thing about... I was going to talk about accents later, but the accents throughout the film are pretty much all American.
It makes the film impossible to place. You have Rita Hayworth, who's American. You have Janet
she's
Blair.
playing an American, which is okay.
She is playing an
she
American,
gets a
you're
pass
right.
on that.
She's from St. Louis, that's right. It's part of the plot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Janet Blair is her best friend. She's supposed to be English, though, right?
She is, although I was reading about it on IMDb or something. It said it follows the exploits of two American showgirls, but actually Janet Blair is supposed to be British. She does one of these exaggerated vowels that Americans do when they're trying to do a British accent. So she says, bath. I think, oh, that's a giveaway.
So there you go. So you have an visiting American showgirl and an English, in brackets, showgirl. Then you have an English accountant turned dancer, played by Mark Platt, who's an American ballet dancer who does this accent. It just has to be heard to be believed. It's almost like he doesn't bother, and then every other sentence he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mancunian. I better drop in an ooh or an ah," and that's literally all he does, isn't it? And then you got Lee Bowman, who's an RAF man, who doesn't even bother at all. You're like, "Hi, how are you doing?"
Yeah.
So I must admit, first time I watched this, I found it impossible. I didn't know if it's supposed to be set in America, set in England. So anyway, the story is of Lee Bowman falling in love with Rita Hayworth and messing it up to begin with. And then them coming together, but the problems of the war are keeping them apart and keeping their relationship sort of... It's on tenterhooks, isn't it? Because she doesn't know, if ever he's going to come back from missions and things.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a weak story.
It's a weak story, yeah. Put it into context of its time, so it was based on a play that ran on Broadway, quite a short run on Broadway, I think less than just a few months, called...
Heart of a City.
Called Heart of a City, well done. So it was obviously made during the war, and it's in flashback.
Yes. Yeah, I should have said that at the beginning. So basically, there's a reporter, and he is backstage at the Windmill, and he's doing an article, and Rita Hayworth, is sort of fleetingly takes photos and gets back on stage again. And he talks to the stage manager guy.
Yeah, Sam.
Who says, there is a great story behind her being here now. And then it just dissolves into flashback and it tells the story. Oh, God. I don't want to be too mean about it because I did enjoy parts of it.
Yeah, let me see if I can draw some positivity out of it.
Yeah, cool.
So there must be something positive about it. I mean, what do you think of the performances? What do you think of the musical numbers? Did you like the musical numbers?
There is one.
Here's a newsreel made strictly for smiles and dedicated to the British Isles.
Where Janet Blair sings Tonight and Every Night. You've told me that's the title tune.
I think that's the title of it, yeah.
Yeah, so basically she comes on stage and the curtains sweep back and they play a newsreel and it's shots of London and shots of English life basically, and she sings to the newsreel, and every now and then she beckons to someone in the newsreel on a busy London street to come and join her basically, and the whole song is basically these real people stepping out of the newsreel and onto the stage with her until the stage is filled with people from all walks of British life, and it's quite patriotic and really quite stirring, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And the way they've done it, I mean, obviously, you can tell how they've done it, but to stage something like that.
So keep your spirits high, the clouds will all roll by. We're gonna win. Come on, because therein lies our might. We'll go on and on tonight. Gonna fight because we're right, and every night.
It's interesting that the musical number that you picked out as the one that was really good. Interesting that is sung not by Rita Hayworth, not by the lead, not by the person at the top of the poster, but by Janet Blair. And I thought she was good, Janet Blair. I thought she was the best thing in it, really.
Yeah, she is totally the best thing in it.
And
The Rita Hayworth number that everyone picks out from this one is what's the one? You Excite Me.
Yeah.
Yeah, where she does that. She's wearing very little clothing, and she's sort of, you excite me, and it's all very exotic and stuff. And that I see that number turn up on clip shows and things, and documentaries about her quite a lot. But it's standard stuff. It doesn't really add to the story in any way. It's after about 8 minutes of it, you're thinking, come on.
When you appear, I hear a cheer like thunder in the blue.
Plot-wise, the "You Excite Me" number, that's the point at which our dashing Air Force chap first becomes besotted with Roz, isn't it, during that song?
Yeah.
So it has some significance. And then he has the good fortune to be in the theatre watching that just as Hitler drops bombs on the theatre, and they all have to go down to the stage, underneath the stage, to shelter from the Blitz, and that's when he gets to talk to her for the first time, which is handy. Good to have a few bombs drop on your head. Get you to meet the.
Let's remember that.
I'll try that in future. It's a Rita Hayworth vehicle, but does it work as a Rita Hayworth vehicle? Is she at her best?
No, this is very, very weak. Her character is nothing. She just literally, she's there to sing and dance, fall in love, and that's it. There's just nothing to her. She's just paper thin.
Yeah, I think the thing about Rita Hayworth in this is big stars like her, big sex symbols like her, they ooze something. There's that, star quality, charisma, whatever you call it, and it kind of just comes out the screen at you. Certainly does in Gilda, which is her, I think the film she did after this, quite soon after this. But for some reason, it doesn't happen in this. And I was wondering also, I wonder if it's because she looks weird in that Technicolor, weirdly painted. I found myself thinking, I've seen you be much more vivacious and, you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. There's a musical number actually where it's her and Janet Blair, and they're doing the whole thing in a military tent in their pajamas.
Yeah.
And it's like a weird bodysuit kind of thing. She's there dancing in her underwear, basically, and
Which would normally be a good
should have
thing.
been. Well, usually, with the right director and the right sort of staging and stuff, you'd be going, "Oh my god, that one is for the ages," But it's just another one. It's just another one of these moments in the film that sort of goes for something and fails.
Are you ready, Maestro? Let's torture the customers.
Xylophone Man. The xylophone moment at the Windmill, they did actually have sort of vaudeville kind of variety type acts in between the big dancing numbers because they had to change the set and costumes and things. So I looked into this. I think it's called The Great Waldo in this film. And it's called Professor Lamberti. And this was his act. The scene in the film is he gets to go and do his act. He's been asking for ages. You get the impression he's been asking for ages. He
He's
works
sweeping the
backstage.
floor, hasn't he, at the back? And
Yeah. And so he says, stick a stripper on behind him. It'll make it more interesting. So Rita Hayworth comes in and takes a choker off and fiddles her fingers in the gloves and stuff. There's quite an annoying turn, I thought, kind of going, ooh.
Yeah, I'm
wink,
sexy.
wink, nudge, nudge to the audience. Yeah, aren't I sexy kind of thing. But this is what Professor Lamberti's act was in real life. He would play a bad xylophone and a stripper would come on, and as people were cheering the stripper, he would pretend to be encouraged by that cheering. And it's the same gag over and over again.
Oh my God, it's bloody painful to watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole, he keeps, with the paper bag and woohoo, and he keeps like jumping up in the air. Oh God, that was a real test of willpower, that was.
Yeah.
And it was so bloody long as well. It just went on and on.
Well, the whole thing felt baggy for me. You get the impression it's supposed to be kind of quick-fire, banterish dialogue, and it's just not. It's not a question of speaking it quicker. It's a question of it being written at slightly snappier and edited better somehow. I just lost interest and...
Yeah. There's 10% of a good film in there. It's like the Janet Blair character is really good. That musical number with the newsreel is really good. The love affair between Rita Hayworth and Lee Bowman is just uncomfortable, really. He basically sleazes his way into dating her. He sort of like relentlessly asks her and sort of pressures her until she goes, okay then. And then he tries to get her up in his room and, you can tell what he's got on his mind.
It's under false pretenses, isn't it?
Yeah, like she's warned about it and she goes to his apartment anyway and it turns out to be true. He is just trying to get her into bed. And then they sort of part, and then he comes back and makes some horrible remark about, we didn't blame you for trying, do you? And within the same scene, she's sort of in his arms again. It's really weird.
That is unconvincing. I think thing is, when you watch older films, you do have to accept a certain.
Yeah,
There's a convention
100%.
to the way love affairs play out. But this, I found her conversion to liking him or being in love with him.
Like totally besotted with him.
Yeah, was completely
It's like-
unconvincing.
She went from like, I don't want to see you anymore. And then all he did was he turned up and said, oh, come on. And she went, actually, you're right. I will marry you. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And then I did kind of like the bit with with his father towards
Yeah.
the end. I thought that was really
Do you want
good.
to explain
because
what
she's
happens in that?
So, well, he's just disappeared, hasn't he? She doesn't know where he is, and she's spoken to his squadron, and they said, well, they're sort of stum about it, and it's all a mystery, and she's assuming that he's just sort of cheating on her or something, or gone off partying or something. In reality, he's actually gone on a secret mission, and he's not allowed to tell anyone, and they're not allowed to tell her. So she's kind of, I don't know where he is, and I'm worried, but at the same time, I'm worried in case I'm trusting him with my heart, and I shouldn't. And then she gets a message saying that his father has come to the theatre, and he wants to speak to her. And when she looks out into the audience, and he's pointed out to her, she sees that he's wearing a vicar's collar, and she thinks, oh well, he's obviously come to warn me off or pay me off or something. She doesn't want.
He looks like
he doesn't
Lord
want me with.
Reith, sort of stern and Presbyterian.
Yes, and this is when perfect nights come. The xylophone act happens, and she does her little striptease thing and all this. Anyway, she goes back to her dressing room to await his father and his judgment. And he comes in, and he's not there to do that at all. He tells her that Paul is on a secret mission, and that he shows her this Bible, and Paul's marked a passage out about how he wants to marry, and it's next to a photo of Rita Hayworth, and it turns out that he is actually genuinely in love with her, and the father gives his blessing, and he says, it's lovely to meet you, and I really hope you'll be happy, and it's lovely to gain a daughter or something, and it's a really sweet moment.
Yeah.
And then the film kind of wraps itself up very quickly after that. You kind of finally get to the message I think the film was always trying to make, which was there are wars going on at home as well as in the air, and in Europe, people are fighting to keep morale up, which is the whole point of this place, this Windmill, this music box, whatever you want to call it. And she is an essential part of keeping morale up, and she's doing just as big a job as the soldiers on the field. I think that bit works, and I found the sort of tragic twist at the end. I really thought that was good.
Did you?
I didn't. I was quite affected by that. I think the message that you're finally given towards the end, about how even someone like a showgirl has her role to play in the war.
Normal life has to continue in the midst of bombs raining down.
Yeah.
People still fall in love and die and have have nice moments and sad moments. And no, I think you're right. I mean, I didn't find that tragic ending all that convincing. I was there is this kind of love triangle that turns into a love square, and then I was unconvinced and lost track as well.
I won't spoil the ending, but it's fair to say that not everyone in the film makes it out alive, and
There is a war on.
There is a war on after all, and I thought the ending was really good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I think it was one of the redeeming things. That and Florence Bates as well. I thought she was great.
Florence Bates plays Mrs. Tolliver, or Tolly, as they all refer to her, and she's kind of Mrs. Henderson, Vivian Van Damme, and the backstage choreographer type people all rolled into one. And she's like a Lady Bracknell as well. And she's like this. Does she literally have pince nez, little flicky pince nez, or she looks like she should have those anyway?
Probably. She has them in every other film, so
Yeah.
you'd be forgiven if you're wrong here. That's right. Yeah.
And
she's great.
You were saying before that you were pointing out that she has all these rules, these hard and fast rules that she has, but then it changes her mind.
It's a mark of a really badly written script. This isn't a running joke, This is actually just a really badly written character. Like literally, she comes along, she sees someone audition, she goes, "No thanks." Yes, and then someone goes, "Oh, give him a chance." She goes, "Okay," and that's it. And then there's one part where the dancers say to her, "Why don't we stop going home because we're getting bombed and and stuff. Why don't we all stay in the theatre? And she's like, oh, that's a ridiculous idea. You can't do that because, it's impractical. And then someone goes, oh, go on. And she goes, oh, okay then.
Yeah.
And then these soldiers
Such a
walk in and say,
pushover.
oh, don't stop performing because she's saying, I want to shut the theatre. And they're like, don't, we need it. And she says, oh, all right. It's like every single thing in the whole. I don't even know why she's there, but I'm glad she is because she's great.
She is good, isn't it? Yeah. What I thought was quite interesting though was it's directed by Victor Saville, who is British, very British. He directed most of Jesse Matthews' films in the 30s,
Yeah.
so he's got a good pedigree of kind of tight comic musicals under his belt.
Yeah.
But he made this in Hollywood. So I'm not quite sure what goes wrong. I think there is this kind of industry thing in Hollywood, isn't there, where people kind of they get sort of chewed up and spat out a little bit, and they don't get to fulfil their own vision. They get taken over there.
Yeah.
Apart from people like Hitchcock, who dominated.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Hitchcock there. Hitchcock and Saville were, friends from, like, they were very good friends. And I think with Victor Saville, he was a much better producer than he was a director. But I think when you're a producer and you have artistic ambitions, I think every now and then you think, I think I could do this one. Why are we handing the chair to someone? And it seems like that for Victor Saville, because he did produce some amazing films. Like you got Goodbye Mr. Chips, and you've got A Woman's Face with Joan Crawford. I think he did a lot of good work producing. I think perhaps I don't know about his directing career. He doesn't seem like he's ever really stood out with directing.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with this film is that there's so many characters in it that it's just a juggling act, and some people can do it and some people can't. I just don't think this film does it. It's like, why devote 15 minutes to a xylophone act when it's just the weirdest thing? You watch it and you're just not satisfied. The ending's good, and it has a thread of something going through it that kind of keeps it a little bit coherent and a tiny bit satisfying at the end. You can kind of see what they were going for, but it's like a big grand failure.
So that is now all the Windmill films done and dusted. We will not be returning to the subject of the Windmill Theatre unless somebody makes another Windmill film. However, I'm sure you'd like to know the official Soho Bites order of preference for these films. So here it is. The fourth best Windmill film is, I'm afraid, one in which our friend Jill makes a small appearance playing herself. From 1966, it's Secrets of a Windmill Girl. At third place, you've just heard it discussed, from 1949, it's Tonight and Every Night, a big grand failure, according to Adam Roach. In at number 2, it's about a national treasure, it stars a national treasure, and it's the only film made this century. From 2005, it's Mrs. Henderson Presents, Not Off, which means in the number 1 slot is Murder at the Windmill, a slightly shabby but mostly charming comic murder musical mystery from 1949, featuring a very young John Pertwee. My thanks to both guests today, Jill Millard Shapiro and Adam Roach. Jill's book about the Windmill, Remembering Reviewdeville, is available to buy online, and there are details about it in the show notes, as well as other bits and bobs about the Windmill at sohobitespodcast.com. Adam's epic new Secret History of Hollywood series about the life of Cary Grant is imminent, and if it's half as good as his previous series, it will be a corker. He also hosts an online film club every Sunday night, so to find out about all of this, follow him on the Twitters for news and updates on @MovieHistories. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Soho Bites on your favourite podcast provider. There's a handy subscribe button at sohobitespodcast.com. Mural Morsels is on the same feed, so you'll get those too, because I was too stingy to fork out for a second feed. And I would love it if you were able to leave a nice review for us in iTunes or wherever else such a task can be undertaken. If you have suggestions for Soho-related features or films to talk about on the show, you can tweet them to @BitesSoho or email us at sohobitespodcast@gmail.com. Soho Bites is produced by me, Dom DeLargy, and is based on an original idea by Dr. Jingan Young. You can follow Jingan and her new research project on Twitter on @CitiesInCinema. Look after yourselves, wear a mask, wash your hands, and all will be well. Until next time, bye for now.